Hey guys, welcome back to First Person Prepping. I've got another radio video for you today. This time what I'm doing is I'm demonstrating a new kit that I built. I'm calling this one the Field Information Radio. So it's an inexpensive listen-only kit, and what it does is it allows you to listen to pretty much anything between about 500 kilohertz all the way up to 1900 megahertz. It's built around this little guy right here, which is the RTL-SDR USB dongle. These are very versatile and inexpensive pieces of kit. I'd recommend everybody get one. I've done a couple videos on them before. And then this little laptop here, the Evolve Maestro 3. So the Evolve Maestro, the laptop is going to have all of the software you need installed and pre-configured, and some kind of walkthroughs and guides on it demonstrating how to use the kit, and a couple of tools pre-installed that are useful for not just vanilla listening, but also kind of signals intelligence and gathering information about signals in your area. So it's going to be less oriented about listening to one particular frequency and more about listening to a wide swath of frequencies, plotting them out, and kind of charting all of the activity in your area, which is a great way to find new signals that you didn't really know were there. So one of the advantages of the laptop that I'd also like to point out that's really useful for off-grid operation is that it's a 12-volt DC laptop. This is your charger that comes with it, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify the charger with these little Anderson power pole plugs, and you can plug this into any 12-volt ham radio battery or 12-volt car battery or 12-volt power supply of any kind you have from like solar or whatever, and you can use that to charge the laptop. So it'll come with the RTL-SDR USB dongle. That comes with a short whip antenna. This whip antenna is good for most of any of the frequencies that a handheld radio would be using. But this dongle will also do long-range HF. So I'm also going to include a long wire antenna on one of these wire winders. And then this is your setup for connecting it to the RTL-SDR. So you can thread it in right here. The couple of adapters here are useful. So if you have a better antenna than that little whip, like you bought a mag mount antenna for your Baofeng or something like that, or like a J-pole you string up in a tree, you can screw it into this end here. This is the same end as the Baofeng uses. This is SMA. So any antennas designed to be plugged into the Baofeng directly can go into that adapter right there. If you have a ham radio antenna that you'd like to use, this is a BNC connector right here. So a lot of, ham radio coax cable for portable field work will use BNC, or a lot of antennas will use BNC as well. And then it's connected here to what's sometimes referred to as a Cobra head. This is a binding post adapter from the BNC, and then these thread on right here. So you just remove this terminal here, add one end of your long wire antenna there, tighten it down, and then get it up in a tree. This is not up very high, and it's not a ton of wire in the air, but honestly, it does just fine. So let's get the kit booted up, and I will start screen recording, and then we can demonstrate some of the capabilities. Okay, so on the desktop, the first thing you should do is check out your README right here. This is the contents of the kit, an instruction manual for the kit, and just enough radio theory to get you to be operational, right? I'm not going to try and teach you everything about radio. I'm just going to try and teach you a little bit so you know kind of what frequencies to listen to, especially on the HF. Just a little bit of theory on that, because that's something that I think there's a lot of confusion with. So in here is your reference material folder. This is going to contain a couple of net schedules, some open source documents that kind of give you a better understanding of radio. Read through those at your leisure, and this is where your README is. There will be a paper copy as well, but just in case you lose it or damage it, you can print off another right from the laptop. So this software right here is called SDR Sharp. If you want to actually listen to a radio signal instead of plotting it out or charting it or decoding it, SDR Sharp is where you start, right? So in SDR Sharp, you have your frequency up here. You can adjust it by clicking up or down. It's already configured to use your RTL dongle. And then here's where you select the decoding mode. So if you're trying to listen to Baofengs, you're going to be using narrow FM, NFM. AM radio, aircraft, or shortwave broadcast is going to be using AM. And then you have lower sideband and upper sideband, which are usually on HF for amateur radio voice communications. Amateur radio digital communications on HF are going to use upper sideband. So pick the mode you want to use. You can also select your bandwidth. What this controls right here, your sample rate is the bandwidth that your SDR is listening to. So once I hit play, you'll see that I'm actually listening to a wide band of frequencies at once. And this is what makes this SDR receiver different from, like, you know, your Baofeng handheld or the FM radio in your car, right? As I kind of scroll through here, I'm listening to this entire spectrum and plotting out any signals that I see as little spikes on this graph. And then right down here is your waterfall. So you can see this signal that's kind of pulsing on and off is showing up as stripes in my waterfall. This is a absolute tremendous advantage versus a traditional radio. It allows you to find unknown signals a lot faster, and there's some other tools with this kit that allow you to generate these waterfall displays and these spectrum displays over longer periods of time, and we'll go into that a little bit later. But right now, you see we've got a couple of signals that are just showing up right here. You can also take this all the way down to the HF spectrum. So say 14 megahertz is the amateur radio 20 meter band. That's right down here. I'm going to zoom in right here. This is the 20 meter ham band. If I'm in upper sideband for voice, I can click right around here. And then I can just tune up and down until I get best reception. Let me turn the volume up. There you go. And so that's how you would do analog voice on HF. I'm going to hit stop here so I can change my settings. This laptop has a little bit of trouble doing the screen recording software I'm using to make this video and running this software and running the digital. So one thing you can do to make it a little easier if you start running into performance issues is you can turn this sample rate down. It'll listen to a smaller chunk of the spectrum. So instead of 2.4 megahertz, I'm going to listen to 1/10 of that, so 0.25 megahertz, 250 kilohertz. Still quite a bit, but it's a little easier for the software to keep up. So I'm going to hit play there, and then I'm going to do a quick demonstration of how the digital software works. I'm going to mute my speakers. I do have to leave this software with the audio on in order for it to decode in the digital software. So there's two different digital softwares I have installed. I have JS8 Call and FL-Digi. JS8 Call, there's a little more activity on. GhostNet is one of the nets that uses JS8 Call, but that's also used very commonly by ham radio operators. It's semi-automated, so there's a lot of check-ins and signal-to-noise reports going on there. FL-Digi is more for scheduled nets. Organizations like Amron use FL-Digi to send weekly bulletins. There's information on those in the ref material folder. To use either one of those, first you start up SDR Sharp and select your frequency, and then you open up that software. So I'm going to open up JS8 Call to start. And now we're going to go to the JS8 Call frequency. If I click on the frequency here, I can change it to the standard JS8 Call frequency of 14,078. And now if I'm in a position where my antenna is positioned well enough and there's activity on the band, I'll start to see some signals show up, like this signal right here. So one thing to note about JS8 Call is it requires an accurate clock on your computer. So if you're running off grid and you're a few seconds off, you might need to go over here to your timing window, and there's a couple of options here to adjust your timing. So if you see signals in this area here, you can listen to them, and then you can hit set time drift to now whenever those signals drop. They kind of come on for several seconds and then they cut out, and then they come on for several seconds and cut out. Or if you have an accurate wristwatch that's accurate to within a couple seconds, you can just wait till the start of a minute and click right there. So this is JS8 call. If there was a net going right now, we could probably listen into that, but there doesn't appear to be anything going on right now. So some of the other tools in here are RTL Pan and RTL Power. These are a little difficult to use. Well, RTL Power in particular has got a little bit of a learning curve. I've tried to automate that as much as I can, and I've got it outlined in the README. But let's start with RTL Pan. So this is a great tool for signals intelligence and for listening to try and find unknown signals in your area. So I'm going to swap out my HF antenna, the long wire, for the short little whip antenna that comes with the RTL-SDR. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take an FRS radio and show you how you can use this to scan and just kind of instantly see those signals no matter what frequency they're using. So FRS radios are between 462 and 467 megahertz. So I'm going to change the frequency in RTL Pan to go from 460 to 470. Resolution of 5K. You can change this. The larger this is, the more coarse your scan is. It'll be a little bit less precise, but it'll scan faster. 5K is kind of a good compromise right here. I would not recommend using AGC. This is, caused some errors in the software for me. You can adjust your gain right here. And I wouldn't adjust either of these settings either. This setting right here, if you have multiple SDR dongles plugged into the computer at once, you can tell this software which one to use. So you could be scanning multiple sections of the spectrum, or you could be listening with one and then scanning with the other. So once you've got all that set up, just hit start. And it's going to start plotting that entire patch of the spectrum there. And I see there's a couple of little spikes here where I'm receiving some signals. And if I scroll over them, I can read off what frequency they're at. So let me go grab my little handheld radio. And I am going to transmit in the FRS range. I have an attenuator in line on my radio here that's going to simulate my radio being much further away. So if I were to transmit on FRS4, for example, that's 462.6375. As soon as I transmit, you're going to see a big spike show up, right? And now when I stop transmitting, that spike will go away. But you can see that I have like a max hold outline here, so I can still scroll over it and read off that it's right around 462.62 to 462.64, right? So I don't have the exact frequency, but I can get pretty close. It'll also show up down here on the waterfall. So if I have left this scanning and I come back in a few minutes, I can see it there as well. So if I transmit on a totally different frequency, FRS 10, within a second, it's just going to pick that right up as well, right? So pick the frequency of interest that you want to scan for. Oh, look, we had a very wide digital signal right there. Just came up out of nowhere, right? So pick the frequency of interest, dial it in right here, and hit start, and you can do live scanning right here. So what if you don't want to? Sit and scan live? Well, that's where RTL Power comes in. So RTL Power is it's a command line utility that lets you scan a very, very wide batch of spectrum and kind of save it all to a file. And then there's another tool that takes that scan and converts it into an image. And these images can contain basically a waterfall display from an entire day. You can set this up to be automated. So what I've done is I've created a script here that if you edit this script, you can change the name of the scan and the low and high frequency and the resolution, and then how long you want the scan to run for. And then you can set it as a scheduled task on this computer. So for example, I had a scan going from the entire 40 to 20 meter band on HF, and it would just start every morning at midnight and then stop right before midnight the next day, and I had an entire week's worth of HF scans of what I could read in my area. So I could see shortwave stations when they came on and off. I could pick out, weekly HF nets. You could do the same over FRS and GMRS to see, if someone has GMRS repeaters in your area. And I have a couple of scans that I'd like to show you as well to kind of demonstrate what you can do with RTL power. Okay, so I've got a couple of scans loaded, and I wanted to show you the kinds of things you can do with them. So this is an example of a pretty wideband scan over an entire 24-hour period. This one right here is for the 40 meter band all the way up to the 20 meter band on HF. That's about 7 megahertz up to about 14.5. I think I might have made it go to 16 just to make sure I caught the entire portion of the band. But this is what the RTL power scans look like after you've created them. So there's a little bit of a kind of a pattern all the way across that's got to do with the sensitivity of your antenna or the sensitivity of your receiver. But these individual little streaks here are each individual signals. And this little white stripe across the top here is your frequency bar. If we zoom way, way in, you'll be able to see you'll be able to read off the precise frequency. And on the very left here, it's so small on this huge scan that you can't see it. There's a little time section that will show you the time at which these signals showed up and went away. So this is basically a waterfall scan of a very large portion of the band over an entire 24-hour period. So there's a couple interesting things you can see here. So these really bright signals right here, you'll get to know the shape of some of these signals over time. This kind of like bilateral shape with like a strong center stripe and then kind of fuzzy edges outwards. That's an AM signal. So these are different AM shortwave stations that came in and stopped at different times. These are single sideband signals. They're kind of like one half of one of these AM signals with the bright center stripe taken away. So these are single sideband voice. You can even tell if it's lower sideband or upper sideband. So this has got kind of a brighter section on the right and then kind of fades off to the left. This is lower sideband. And this one right here was at 7178, it looks like, was the suppressed carrier of that single sideband. And then down here you have some digital signals or Morse code signals, right? So what we can see here is when the 40 meter band is most active, which, you'll get to know that over time, but it's useful to be able to plot it out and let you know like exactly when the band is coming in or out. So like here's a huge burst of activity right around sunrise. It kind of fades off a little bit during the day, but I still get some activity. And then another huge burst of activity at night. And this little block right here was actually a scheduled contest, believe it or not. It was a Morse code contest between this section and this section, and started and stopped at a certain time. So that's a really interesting little, like there's just this block of spectrum and time that's just very, very busy. So you can kind of find things like that. Not that that's a terribly useful thing to find, but if you wanted to find a block of the spectrum that's like empty on a schedule, if you wanted to set up your own scheduled net, this might be a good way to do that and see what bands are operating at what time. So all the way over here on the right, on the other side of this massive scan, I have the 20 meter band. And the 20 meter band is going to be a little bit quieter from my particular location, but you'll also see kind of the inverse pattern of activity where it's terrible at night and then it's really good during the day. All right, so this is the 20 meter band. It looks like we've got a couple of blocks of activity here. A fair bit of activity actually around the end of this scan. And then I can scroll up and I can see when the 20 meter band is active and when it's dead. So I can also see these horizontal stripes here. Some of these horizontal stripes are related to interference, right? If I turn on a loud interference source next to my radio, it'll kind of swamp it out for a short period of time. So that can actually kind of help you to figure out, like, if you have a signal that, if you have an interference that comes in at like 6 p.m. every night, maybe it's when your neighbor comes home and starts watching TV, right? Like maybe his TV is kicking off interference or something like that. But yeah, you can see, kind of when the bands come in and out. So that was an HF scan. But a little more interesting and possibly more useful is going to be scanning VHF and UHF. So I have two scans loaded here as well. So this is the 70 centimeter band. This is the entire 70 centimeter band, the ham radio band. And again, you'll see this kind of repeating pattern across the back there. If you just kind of ignore that, that's got to do with the receiver and the antenna. And then I can already see there's one stripe of activity right here. Since it's so constant throughout the entire day, that's probably some kind of telemetry. At a guess, I'd say that's probably the APRS frequency for like packet reporting systems. You can notice that on the VHF band as well. So we're going to look at one of the VHF scans right here. And one way you can look at these scans to read off more precise frequency and time information is to pull them into a spreadsheet. And when you pull them into a spreadsheet, you can fix the top row and the right row, anchor those. So as I scroll up and down this image, I still have my frequency readout here. So I'm going to zoom out and look for a signal. Now, kind of as expected, I see mostly nothing, right? Most of this 2 meter band is going to be empty, but I see little blips of signal in here. So there's one kind of faint signal right here. There was a very loud signal for a very short period of time right there. That one was probably very close. And then I see a little bit of activity here and here. Now, this is kind of interesting because we can see from this pattern of activity that this activity here and this activity here seem to move together, right? So what does that tell us whenever there's activity on this frequency, there's activity on that frequency? Like there's some kind of link between them, right? They might be a linked repeater network, or they might be, one repeater with an offset, although this is a fairly short, I think this is a little too close for that to be an offset. So this is most likely a linked repeater network. At least 2 repeaters that I can hear are part of the same network where anything into one repeater gets retransmitted across the network. So if I look at that and I want to zoom in, I can also tell what frequency and time that took place. And this is all passive collection that I can leave running throughout the day, right? And then come back and review at a later date. Although to be perfectly honest with you, I might want to review it on a separate computer with a little bit more RAM. Yep, so here they are. Right, this is 146 megahertz. Yeah, there's 147. So this is 146.52, looks like. Yeah, if that's 2, 4, 6, 8, yep, 146.52 is a signal there. And then, okay, so here's the linked repeaters. We have one of them at 147.165, it looks like. And then we have another one at 146.94, give or take. All right. And again, that same kind of pattern of activity. Whenever I see activity on one, I see activity on the other. Although this is a little interesting. There's a little gap there where it wasn't sent on this station. So perhaps these are digital and there's selective calling or something along those lines. So I got another slightly weak signal here. This looks like a very intermittent signal here, so maybe there were just 2 people chatting back and forth. If I see a lot of activity on one frequency, that's probably a repeater. And if I go online to something like Repeater Book or Radio Reference, I can probably find out where that repeater is based, right? So that's more or less how these scans work. You can scan on the ham bands, you can scan off of the ham bands. You could also use these to scan like law enforcement or FIR frequencies. If you look those up on radio reference, a lot of that stuff is going to be encrypted, so you won't be able to decode it, but you'll be able to, plot out activity and where it is and what you can expect to hear in your location. So there's a lot of capability in this kit, from just straight up listening to active collection of wide spectrum with RTL pan to passive collection over long times of period with over a long period of time with RTL power. So that's the idea behind it. You can also expand this to do all sorts of other things. There's a million projects that the RTL-SDR dongle are capable of doing, including decoding aircraft ADS-B transmissions. Kind of the sky's the limit if it's a radio signal between about 500 kilohertz and 1900 megahertz. So that's the kit and a not so short walkthrough. These are fairly technical kits and there's a lot to learn, and I am kind of marketing them towards people who are kind of new to radio or kind of still learning. So one of the things I'm going to be including with these is 2 hours of one-on-one instruction, and that's going to be included with the price. And I'm going to be asking $220 for these for everything that you saw in the video plus those 2 hours. If you're interested, shoot me an email at firstpersonprepping@proton.me and we can see if we can get you one of these sent out. As you can tell from the video, this is an extremely small operation. This is literally just me operating off of my kitchen table. So there might be a little bit of lead time with these, but rest assured I'm not going to take your money unless I can get a product out to you fairly quickly. If there's more demand than I anticipate and it takes me a little while to get these out, I just ask for your patience.